Chapter 9 covers production and operations management. This works a lot with manufacturing. Many entrepreneurs go into service industries. You may be going into manufacturing, covering a few of the key topics that are discussed in the text. Manufacturing in the U.S. is growing in some areas, and Housatonic does have a manufacturing program. It's basically an associate's degree, but you learn the skills to work in a factory. It's not what it used to be, hot, dirty, and disgusting. It's often in an air-conditioned place, and in many cases, an high-tech manufacturing job can pay better than a white-collar job. There are needs in Connecticut where they're trying to fill the requirements to hire people. And this is talking about what we are doing good in America. America does a lot of good. What we're selling here for products, most of our foods are grown, manufactured, shipped, processed in America. And these are the top manufacturers here. Apple, I know a lot of the things are made overseas, okay? Monster Beverage, you've all heard of them. Hershey with their chocolate bars. I don't know if Coach how much they manufacture in America, but they could be doing it. And it's just talking an example here about freight farms where they're growing all these greens here. They work with smaller companies so local food can be enjoyed year round. One of the biggest things going on now, and especially in the restaurants, is farm to table, where the foods are locally sourced. And I've always wondered how in the middle of February they are getting lettuce to the restaurant or carrots. A lot of it is seasonal or it can be stored. Unfortunately, America is no longer a manufacturing-based country, mostly service sector. These are the service sector jobs, the top paying ones. There's also supply and demand here. Entertainment, there's only a few superstars. It's a handful, or sports stars. We're still competitive in many areas in America. And what we have to do is to focus on the customers, quality, provided with a good value. The internet has been very helpful in many ways here. It's changed a lot of things. Germany has a very high-tech economy, and it's saying here China has purchased many German firms. They're studying their production techniques. Efficiency means lower costs, which means either higher profits, more competitive pricing, and the more sustainability for the company. You also want high quality. And it talks about production here. If you're going to be producing anything, you're going to need a facility, you're going to need labor, you're going to need money, you've got to have a knowledge of what you're doing. Operations management, you're doing a factory here, you've got to know a lot of things. You don't want too much inventory, especially, for example, let's say you're selling Christmas lights. You don't want 20 million of them sitting in your warehouse in February when it's 10 months away. Yet, if you are manufacturing, you have to realize the cost of money and stocking and warehousing. You also have to schedule the manufacturing. You may be doing things custom made. Used to be with cars, they'd be custom manufactured. When I got my car, a few years ago, I had to wait about a month to get it because I put a couple of specific requirements that I didn't want all the extras. Operations management also applies to the service sector, where you're doing things that make you stand out from the competition, such as the Ritz-Carlton. And it's talking about apps for iPad here. Some of these are free, but I just say they could be, what's the word? Subject to change. The app could disappear. What you're doing here, this was written over a year ago. Things could have revised in the meantime, or changed, or new apps are out there. There's a production process here. The output, is the goods or the services. Inputs, you got to have a knowledge Capital, you have to be able to make it. Production control, you got to know how to plan. If you're going to sell 10,000 t-shirts, you better have an idea of how you're going to A, weave the fabric, or are you going to buy it? B, are you going to be sewing it? Are you going to be printing it? And you're going to have to schedule things if you're doing things on a seasonal basis. And form utility, it's really the value that these producers add. Even though you might be seeing that t-shirt with maybe $1 worth of fabric, you might end up spending $25 with it because it went through several processes of the sewing, the design of the logo, the shipping, the marketing, distribution to the store's profit, the store's salary for the people there, the rent for that store. You know what I am saying. And these are the production requirements. You want good quality. You want to do things as cheaply, I should say cheaply, but as efficient with the price here. You want them to be delivered on time. If you're selling Christmas trees or Christmas lights, you want them in the store well before Christmas. You don't want to be delivering them on February 3rd. They'll be worthless then. Different ways of manufacturing here. You could be producing it you could have process manufacturing. There's the assembly process. You might have to put components together. It could be a cake, as we see here, where you have to bake the layers, you have to frost it, you have to put it in the box, you have to ship it so that way it's not stale when it gets to the customer. You could also have it in a retail store where the cake is there already frosted, and all somebody has to do is write on there with a tube of frosting, happy birthday, happy anniversary, happy retirement. And you have production processes. For example, if you're doing cookies, widgets, whatever, it could spitting them out of the machine. You could also do an intermittent process. There's always a different type of M&M every 2 weeks, it seems, in the store now, where you can make them green, pink, whatever. You could have summer ones, fall ones, trick-or-treat ones, etc. And it's talking about some of the products, how fast they're made. And these are things that are making U.S. more competitive. The lean manufacturer might have taken 50 people to do something 100 years ago. One person can do it. You can customize things here. You're using computers. Flexible manufacturing, where the machines, the equipment can do more than one different thing, where they're multi-purpose. Again, cost efficiencies. You no longer need 10,000 square feet. You can now produce everything in 1,000 square feet. It means not only less people, but less real estate, which is why you see so many empty factories here. A couple of reasons. Overseas manufacturing. And the second one is we're doing it more efficiently in smaller space. CAD, good thing to know if you ever want to work in manufacturing. And then you have computer-aided manufacturing. Technology does help. We could see a diagram where they're using computers to help design clothes, cut the patterns. So that way you don't need 25 people with a pair of scissors. You could be doing this automatically on a machine where it cuts the forms for the dresses or whatever. Computer integrated manufacturing. You're using the CAD and using it with the manufacturing. It can be very expensive. As you can see here, they're using this to build high-end equipment such as construction equipment. You have it automated. It works with cars where you get the doors fitting much better. Flexible manufacturing, I talked about that. You can use the robotics. They do a whole bunch of tasks here. They can be programmed in different ways. Lean manufacturing, less space, less inventory. Part of the thing, if you are selling to stores or other manufacturers, it's called JIT, just in time. You want the stuff shipped really fast. That way they don't have to keep 100 parts on the floor. They could get 5 parts delivered every week, every month, whatever their requirements are. It helps their cash flow, reduces storage. It means developing partnerships between the vendor and the buyer. Again, the customization, I was talking about the M&Ms before. It can work also in the service sector. Talks about guitars here, where people can have their guitar looking exactly the way they want. You see photo albums, you see all these things online. We get coffee mugs customized, very reasonably priced. You can get a coffee mug for $12 with your favorite logo on it or your photo on it. Robotics, supposedly higher quality. The sensors, everything is programmed. Even though we are losing people on the line, we are needing people to program the robots. And yes, the robots need maintenance. Operations management. You're going to start making your t-shirts. A lot of things that you're going to do before you start selling your 10,000 whoopee t-shirts. You got to figure out where the factory's going to be, laying out the factory for the equipment. You have to plan what materials you need, purchasing them, maintain inventory. You don't want shrinkage. That's another issue. And you also want quality control. You don't want extra large t-shirts that don't fit a 4-year-old. When you're doing a location, you want it where you can ship it easily. You don't want a factory if you're selling 100-pound items in the middle of Montana, because it's going to be very difficult if it's 300 miles from the highway. It might be a cheaper place to build the factory. However, you're going to have to find people to come there when you're in a town of 12. And if you're on a dirt road 6 miles away from, or I should say 100 miles away from a highway, it's going to add to distribution costs. And if you're doing brick and mortar like a retailer, you need a good location where people are going to find you. And we do go overseas because you can get things done much cheaper overseas. And if you're doing things in certain areas and you close down your factory with 500 people, it can put a lot of people out of work, drastically affect the economy in that town. It's talking about children wear industries here. What are you going to do when you're faced with that problem? It's either stay in business by going overseas or keeping the people here, letting the business go under in another year or two. You don't have a choice in this. Sometimes you've got to do triage and figure out what to throw overboard. And it talks about internet-focused strategies. I wasn't purchasing. I bought for a few years. I have been out of the purchasing field for over 20 years now. It's changed drastically. And if I were to go back into it, I would have to do a lot of learning. But I also know how to negotiate, which is important when you're doing a contract with a major supplier. And it also talks about people working from home. However, if I'm opening up a fast food restaurant, I can't have my sandwich makers making bologna sandwiches at home. When you're doing things here, whether it's service or manufacturing, it's a restaurant or a store or manufacturing, you want the customers to find the products, you want efficiency, so that way you don't waste steps or precious square footage. Talks about 4 different layouts for your manufacturing: assembly lines, modular, fixed position, and process layout. Fixed position is basically you're building a house. You can't really build that in the factory, except you can do the modular where they can build parts and ship it to the house and you put it together. Assembly line is good for items like automobiles. It's showing a little assembly line layout here, from axles to cabs to doors, and getting bigger. The modular layout here, It goes into different ways here discussed further in the book. You have the process layout. Again, the fixed position, as I mentioned with the house. All the other people have to come to the site. And part of purchasing here is knowing how to plan your materials, MRP, and the ERP. Again, this can be a very good job for people, especially if you get a job at Sikorsky, where there's many people in procurement because they need hundreds, if not thousands, of parts to build their helicopters. Purchasing. You also have to find the suppliers, negotiate prices. The internet, sure, you can search, but it doesn't mean everything. You have to know the quality of that person, and it's more than just looking at a Yelp review. Internet has transformed this profession. I talked about JIT before. You want things when you need them. You have to have good coordination with suppliers. You also want high quality products. You don't want things coming back because they're defective. How many times have you bought something, you had to bring it back, it wasn't made right? I've had that more than once. And it talks about the Sigma process here, which is important, these 6 parts here. BALDRIGE Awards, they give them in many categories here. They're supposedly high awards. Sometimes I have my personal doubts about it. I'm not going to make any editorial comments. It's like looking at all these internet reviews like Yelp or whatever. I don't always trust them. Too many things here. I don't want to talk for 20 minutes about it. ISO, International Organization for Standardization. This helps you assure standards and meet them. It works with many manufacturing things here, and it is a good way to maintain quality and a reputation for your product. PERT, analyzing your tasks involved in a project. Talks about the steps here. Again, if you're in manufacturing, you have to know this stuff, and many of these people are engineers. And this is showing a PERT chart to do a music video, which is interesting. How you're doing things here, you're figuring out the time here. You've got the path here between the choreography, the costumes, yada yada. And if you're doing something fancy, this could take a couple of months to do, believe it or not. And I'm sure you could just do a music video just dancing on your back porch too, and filming it in 3 minutes. Gantt charts. It shows what's being worked on and what's being completed. It's showing things here for a doll factory, what is going on in each week here. Painting, assembly, clothing here. You just can't make the doll. One of the analogies that I say is, let's say you're doing a breakfast or a brunch with blueberry muffins, cup of coffee, and scrambled eggs. What are you going to be doing first? Most likely the blueberry muffins. Then, while they're in the oven, you will brew the coffee. And then the last couple of minutes, you'll be scrambling the eggs. You don't want to be serving them at different times.